right, it's another beautiful day, another beautiful time for us to talk about news that are trending as far as business is concerned, as far as finance, and to talk about economic developmental issues all across the world. This is Early Exchange, and I am Femi Ayodele. As usual, we have the best of programming for you. We are set to give you the best today, as we do every time and every day. Before we go on to the discussion for the day, we're going to set the ball rolling with news updates, and I can assure you Vivian is standing by to take us all around the world. Vivian, good morning. How are you today?
Oh, I'm very well. Good morning, Femi, and good morning to you. Welcome to the morning news update on Souk News. Today, we have a lineup of stories that highlight the latest developments in the world of business and the progress being made in various sectors. From economic partnerships to infrastructural projects, we'll bring you the most important updates that shape the global economy and contribute to sustainable development. I am Vivian Uguche, and we begin right after this short break. Welcome back. Now, the Revenue Mobilization, Allocation and Fiscal Commission, RMAFC, is collaborating with the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission, NUPRC, and the Nigerian Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency, NOSTRA, to improve revenue generation by effectively managing gas flaring and aligning with global best practices. RMFC Chairman Mohammed Bello Shehu said the move is to curb substantial revenue losses and bolster government, that NUPRC and NOSTRA play pivotal roles in regulating gas production quality and quantity while ensuring compliance with environmental standards in host communities. In his response, Mr. Babajide Fashino, Director of Economic Regulation and Strategic Planning at NUPRC, underlined Nigeria's commitment to managing gas flaring in line with global best practices for sustainable economic growth. The Director of ICT at Nostra, Margaret Adeshida, noted that the country had fled over 4.2 billion standard cubic feet of gas, resulting in a loss of more than $14.6 billion in revenue between 2012 and 2021. Meanwhile, the Minister of Aviation and Aerospace Development, Festus Keyamo, has unveiled 3 roadmaps for the Nigerian aviation industry. He apologized to foreign airlines over the trapped funds, which has caused a crisis in the sector in Nigeria for almost 2 years. Now, speaking at the 7th Aviation Summit held in Abuja, Keyamo noted that electropolis maintenance, repair and overhaul facilities, and aircraft leasing company are some of the priorities of the current administration, adding that these 3 are critical for the development of the aviation industry. And now the Guinness World Records has announced the Nigerian Tonye Solomon as the new record holder for the most steps climbed on a ladder while balancing a football on the head. GWR revealed this via its X account and added that Solomon achieved this feat by climbing a whopping 150 ladder steps. The body says after Solomon completed a 60-kilometer journey from Amasoma to Yenagua with a football on his head, some people doubted his story. To prove them wrong, Tonye set a Guinness World Record title by climbing 150 steps on a ladder with a football on his head. What a feat that is. Well, Chelsea has emerged the leading contender in the race to sign Nigerian striker Victor Osimhen from Napoli, with reports suggesting that an agreement for his transfer may already be in place. Osimhen has been in high demand in the summer transfer market, although Napoli had initially demanded a significant transfer fee to retain his services. Despite Chelsea's strong interest, other clubs continue to pursue the Nigerian international, especially since Osimhen has not signed a new contract and will have just 1 year left on his current deal by the next summer transfer window. Chelsea has identified Osimhen as their top target for the summer of 2024, putting them ahead of rival suitors like Arsenal. Chelsea's pursuit of Osimhen is driven by a need to bolster their centre-forward position, which has posed challenges in recent years. Now, despite having prolific strikers like Romelu Lukaku and Timo Werner, the club has struggled to replicate their form at Stamford Bridge. Now, the African Export-Import Bank, Afreximbank, has set aside $1 billion to bolster the local vehicle manufacturing sector across the African continent. This financial commitment was announced by Kanayo Awani, Executive Vice President of Intra-African Trade at Afreximbank, during the IATF 2023 Business Roadshow held in Lagos. The event themed Positioning Nigeria to Harness the Opportunities at the African Continental Free Trade Area, scheduled to take place in Cairo, Egypt, from November 9 to 15, 2023. Awani emphasized the importance of exploring markets beyond Nigeria to fully leverage the benefits of the African Continental Free Trade Area, and with a population exceeding 1.3 billion and the ratification of the body by more than 47 African nations as of August, this ambitious initiative aims to facilitate increased trade within the continent. Furthermore, the report has it, Afreximbank is committed to doubling its financing for intra-African trade, increasing it from $20 billion to $40 billion by 2026. The bank is also collaborating with the AFCFTA Secretariat to establish an AFCFTA Adjustment Fund offering financial and technical assistance grants, as well as compensation funding to AFCFTA parties and private enterprises aiming to participate effectively. In order to boost agricultural productivity, improve food security, and contribute to the country's economic growth, Malawi's President Lazarus Chakwera has launched a new initiative called Mega Farms, aimed at boosting the country's agricultural-based economy and addressing persistent food shortages. The president stated that the Mega Farm program aims to improve the country's foreign exchange reserves and make Malawi self-sufficient in food production, while emphasizing the importance of agriculture for the country's economy, as most of Malawi's foreign revenue comes from farming. He added that the government has already secured markets for the produce from the mega farms, with plans to engage in agro-processing and value addition through the establishment of industrial parks. Also, Malawi police has seized suspected firearms, ammunition, and counterfeit machines for criminal activities from refugees and asylum seekers during the forced relocation of refugees residing illegally outside of the designated refugee camp in Malawi. Over the course of a 3-week operation, the police forcibly opened and searched 24 containers, uncovering 5 rounds of AK-47 rifle ammunition and approximately MK 1.4 million in cash. Now, 4 individuals, including a Malawian national, sent a witness and have been arrested during the operation. Human rights advocates have expressed concerns about the handling of the operation, particularly regarding refugees who were using the containers to store perishable items for their businesses. The executive director of the Center for Human Rights and Rehabilitation in Malawi, Michael, has stressed the need for the government to respect refugees' rights to own property. And we move to the Middle East. In its effort to boost child vaccination coverage, UAE's Ministry of Health and Prevention has unveiled an upgraded version of the app, which they intend to use, and now incorporates comprehensive vaccination records for children from birth until they reach 18 years old. The initiative, driven by the Ministry of Health and Prevention, MOHAP, aims to boost child vaccination coverage throughout the nation. Originally designed for COVID-19 contact tracing and health testing, the ASIN app has evolved into the country's premier digital healthcare platform for vaccinations. The latest app update provides families with an array of digital tools to monitor their children's vaccination status, ensuring they stay up to date with the National Immunization Program. According to the Assistant Undersecretary for Public Health at MOHAP, Dr. Hussein Alvarand, the collaboration between MOHAP and local health authorities guarantee that users have access to accurate and dependable information. Now, let's take a breather. When we return, more stories from UAE and around the world. Stay with us. You're welcome back. Now, Sharjah Executive Council has approved the renewal of the franchise and agreements with a number of companies operating car taxis in the Emirate to enhance the quality of transportation. Now, the meeting was attended by Sheikh Sultan bin Mohammed bin Sultan Al Qasimi, Crown Prince and Deputy Ruler of Sharjah and Chairman of the Sharjah Executive Council. The council also agreed to monitor the performance of the Emirates' government work sectors and make the necessary decisions to support growth and improve joint work among government agencies. The council also approved a proposal to issue legal articles for the Emirate decree on the establishment of the Sharjah Health Authority in order to keep pace with the development in the health sector in Sharjah. Similarly, the Vice President, a Deputy Prime Minister and Minister of the Presidential Court, Sheikh Mansour bin Zayed Al Nahyan, has launched 11 new educational complexes. The Zayed Educational Complexes project is among the UAE's largest educational projects that aim to develop the country's infrastructure as per global education standards and in line with these plans to empower future generations and achieve sustainable development goals. And the complexes encompasses a combined total of 920 classrooms designed to cater to more than 28,000 students. These state-of-the-art facilities include top-tier laboratories covering a range of specialties as well as sports and arts amenities, and each complex is the equivalent of 4 schools boasting between 86 to 92 classrooms and having the capacity to accommodate over 2,500 students each. Furthermore, Guatemalan President-elect Bernardo Arevalo has temporarily suspended his participation in the government transition due to doubts surrounding the transfer of power. This decision comes after the top prosecutor's office in Guatemala raided facilities run by the country's main electoral tribunal. Arevalo believes that the investigation into his electoral victory is part of a coup attempt and has described the raids as flagrant crimes of abuse of authority for electoral purposes that violate the country's constitution. Arevalo has, however, stated that his participation in the transition will resume once the necessary institutional and political conditions are re-established. The Organization of American States has expressed extreme concerns over the raids, stating that they involved the opening of electoral packages and violated Guatemalan electoral law. And now, in her annual policy speech to the European Parliament, European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen has emphasized the need for the European Union to engage more with African countries. She expressed concerns over Russia's role in stirring chaos in the Sahel region and highlighted the destabilizing impact of military coups, which increased the risk of terrorism. Similarly, she called for unity of purpose towards Africa, similar to the approach taken towards Ukraine, and emphasized the importance of cooperation with legitimate governments and regional organizations in order to address the challenges in the region effectively. Von der Leyen's remarks come as the EU's promised infrastructure spending in the global south has been progressing slowly. And our French President Emmanuel Macron has visited Bangladesh's capital, Dhaka, to strengthen bilateral relations between the two countries and a signed deal to facilitate loans for infrastructure development in Bangladesh. Additionally, a letter of intent was signed to provide Bangladesh with an Earth observation satellite system through cooperation between Bangladesh Satellite Company Limited and Airbus Defence and Space France. The visit has seen an opportunity to attract investments from France in sectors where the United States, China, and India are already heavily engaged, and it is also considered to have political and strategic significance ahead of Bangladesh's upcoming general elections. Finally, in the bustling streets of India's capital and its surrounding towns, the chorus of three-wheel electric rickshaw drivers inviting passengers to join them for an 8-cent shared ride has become a familiar sound, and this has drawn praise from drivers and commuters alike. In India, the majority of electric vehicles are not cars, but rather three-wheelers for passengers and goods delivery, as well as two-wheelers for personal mobility. These electric three-wheelers make up 90% of the country's nearly 3 million electric vehicles, playing a pivotal role in India's shift toward cleaner transportation. The preference for electric rickshaws is not surprising, as they offer an affordable transportation solution in developing nations like India. Now, the head of electric vehicle technology at the Center for Science and Environment in New Delhi, Mushimi Mohanty, noted that the market dynamics are driving the growth of electric rickshaws, particularly in addressing last-mile mobility needs. And with that, we wrap up the morning news update. Stay tuned for more analysis on early exchange. I am Vivian Oguche.
It's Early Exchange, where we talk about everything that has to do with business, that has to do with finance, that has to do with economic developmental issues. And now it's time for us to review news updates, news that are trending across the world as regards business and economy. And as usual, I have my analyst in the house, Osame Dahosa. Glad to have you join us this morning.
Good morning, Morning, Vivian.
Good morning.
Morning, Nigerians.
Yeah,
So
it's a cold day today.
Yeah, really cool.
Oh,
as usual.
as usual.
You know, we're in that season. Climate change has influenced the weather and the temperature, but we're used to it.
You know,
And
this.
we're grateful to the call of nature.
Do we still have this thing called August break?
Yeah.
Yeah, but there was no break.
That's part of what we're talking about, the climate change.
When we're talking, yeah.
Where you
Maybe,
can't even
maybe it has
predict.
to take us another decade to be able to monitor and know where the break is actually.
All right, let's delve into the news analysis. We'll start with the story. The Revenue Mobilization Allocation and Fiscal Commission is collaborating with the Nigerian Upstream Regulatory Commission and the Nigerian Oil Spill Detection Response Agency to improve revenue generation by effectively managing gas flaring, aligning with global best practices. Idauza, the issue of gas flaring has been of concern, you know, in the Nigerian space when it comes to oil and gas. You have a situation that over the years, in fact, the record shows that for like 10 years, we've lost about $22.9 billion to gas flaring. What's your reaction to this?
Well, it's massive, and we can be complaining that there's so much poverty, no revenue or money to do critical infrastructure, and yet the nation is losing over 22 billion US dollars in 10 years. And just put for January to November last year alone, 5.6 billion cubic metric ton of gas was wasted, valued at about over 500 million US dollars for just 1 year. And that's massive. Now, we're only looking at the costs for the gas that is flared, but there's a whole lot that comes with it. Mm-hmm. The acid rain, I don't know if you've been to the Niger Delta before. Roofings don't last 6 months. Now, these costs are not counted. Now, the livelihood of the people who live in this environment, the environmental degradation that comes with it, nobody is talking about that. So it's really massive that even when there are very innovative technology to really harness this and make it part of revenue that come to the nation, we have allowed this to linger for too long. We do hope that this collaboration will bring in a lot of change in that direction, where we can actually harmonize and convert this waste into wealth for the nation.
You know, talking about converting waste to wealth, you know, cooking gas.
Yeah.
How do you have that amount of wastage when you have people not having access to cooking gas, when you're trying to transit from fossil fuel to renewable energy? I mean, does it even make any kind of sense? If that market is really handled, you know how much the nation will generate?
Yeah, but again, it's same we're talking about yesterday in terms of looking at how much we waste in terms of the energy generated for transmission. See, it's same process. But what have other people done is actually put some sanctions on the prospecting companies to ensure that there's no gas flared. Because it's also important that we're having the right people doing the right work. I don't think countries like Russia, the Americas, where they also have a whole lot of volume of gas and they are mining and they are creating such environmental degradation as we do here. Now, if the companies there can do it well, why can't we do things at least well for once? Again, this speaks to issues that we always talk about, especially in public service, the issue of supervision, the issues of taking responsibility for anything that is not done well. People are overseeing this sector, and they are seeing this waste. And it assumes that we just pay blind eye to it. Nobody think about it. Nobody talk about it. We just allow it to go. It's normal for us. And I think this must not be allowed to fester if we must be able to account and take care of the infrastructure deficit that we face as a nation.
Let's hope with this collaboration there will be an end to gas flaring in Nigeria. All right, moving on to the aviation sector now. The Minister of Aviation, Festus Keyamo, has unveiled 3 roadmaps for Nigerian aviation industry. It's looking like, you know, when you have a new minister on board, you have this new energy, you have this new enthusiasm to break grounds, you know, to break records.
Yeah.
And now you have the aviation minister, Festus Keyamo, who is a renowned lawyer. I think he's showing the right kind of leadership expected, you know, and I hope he can sustain this. He unveiled a 3 roadmap plan for the aviation industry. What's your impression about this?
What are these plans? I think it should start from there.
Yeah.
Yes.
You see, we have quoted several roadmaps that actually led to nowhere. For me, I think it's important that we have to look at the complete web of how things are in the country, why we are where we are, and have to take a holistic look at all our challenges and then sit down around table to actually be able to profile solutions. Apart from looking at roadmap, if you go to the Nigerian airports, for example, how many conveyor belts are working? Where nations are talking about people coming on spending up to 30 minutes, 10 minutes in the airport after arrival. We spend hours here because a whole lot of things are not functional. At the airport, you still see people doing manual scanning. And I think those immediate things should be the things that should really concern us and see how we can put them in order. That the central cooling system is working. Because you're traveling and you're coming down from another country and you are just arriving at your country, it will just be bare what you see. So these are the things that, of course, we should really focus on in the interim and get this sorted. And I'm not sure that these are going to be amounting to too much money. Let even see one work. Let the Murtala Mohammed International Airport work. Let the Abuja Airport work. Let the Port Harcourt work. I don't know if you fly from Port Harcourt International Airport.
No, I haven't.
You see, these are the issues that we must speak to really and see how we can really see investment. You see, it is better for our leaders to under-promise and over-deliver
Instead of the other
than
way.
over-promising and under-delivering. Because this is what we have seen. And some of all these things play out. So we must, it's not just rushing to the press. That's not where work is. When people see work, they will know that somebody is working. And you don't need to be in the front of camera every day for people to actually know that you are doing what you should be doing. And I think this is what is important. Now, you get to the airport and you see the agencies all are plenty in the airport. You ask yourself, what's their role? Your cargoes are scanned in and scanned out, and somebody is still asking you, open it, I want to see what is inside. See, these are issues that we must have to deal with. Because a whole lot of rent seeking that is happening in the airport space, we first of all clean that out. And then we can now begin to look at the comprehensive aviation industry and see what we can leverage on. But for me, I believe when people work silently and they speak to issues when necessary, is better than these public shows, and really, at the end of the day, people are asking questions.
Let me come in here. You know, you asked a question earlier on, what are the 3 roadmaps that Femi alluded to? So the Ministry of Aviation said that their priorities on maintenance, that's one, which was one of the things you alluded to. And then he said that they were also looking at repair and overhaul facilities as well as aircraft leasing. These are the 3 priorities of the Aviation Ministry. What should take precedence for you?
Well, I think for me, yes, maintenance is critical because a whole lot of infrastructure at that airport, they are not working. And I'm not even sure, especially in the Lagos airport, the last contract that was awarded in terms of building the new facility, whether it was properly delivered. And these are the real critical issues. We also have a challenge even with the runways. The whole of Abuja has one single runway for both local and international flight. That's not healthy for a country that's actually attracting, wanting investors to come, wanting traffic into its domain. We should have one standard airport that is well built, that's functional. Dubai Airport can handle over 7 to 8 aircraft landing at the same time. We can't do that here. So this is what government must be looking into and see how we can begin to invest in some of this basic infrastructure around the airport and ensure that things are working. Our lifts are fine, and of course the conveyor belts are all working. Everything on our airport is always under permanent state of repair. This is not good enough. And I think we should have somebody who should be able to look at these issues and look at the contractors in the face. And if we don't have people who are competent to do these things, then we must go and look elsewhere. Because that's critical, that's important, because that's the gateway to the nation. That's the first impression people get when they come into Nigeria. And it's important. They must also look at the critical issues, especially with the domestic flight, where a lot of delays are done. You cannot predict your flight in Nigeria. It's not done. And this is so unhealthy.
One thing
and nobody really cares. Nobody really cares. Nobody even come to tell you, I'm sorry. So these are issues that, of course, we must speak to. How we treat people. How friendly are those who operate? What are the service level agreement that the ministry is entering with those who operate airline in our airports? Because as regulators, their role is actually to protect the interests of the Nigerian and the flying public. And that also must be taken into account. And all these issues that we see within the space that are not right, we must address it. Of course, there's staff also who are always there to ask, what do you have for the boys? They are also to be trained properly. Because you don't see it elsewhere. You don't see elsewhere. Most of the people, they're all beggarly. And that embarrasses a lot of people. And so you see that they're doing so much that to put you under duress so that they can make something out of you. All these things aside of the maintenance, even having good people work in the airport is also very critical. And I don't think that we have need to have the litany of agencies that we have on the airport. If there's synergy between the security agencies, you have immigration, you have custom, you have NAFDAC, you have all manners of agencies. And everybody is doing their own thing. But I think all these things also have to be looked into to see that you have one system of scanning that can feed custom, feed immigration, NAFDAC, and if there's any alert, somebody can be called, and then the agency where they are can come and do their action. But then to be physically present at the gate and see everybody at the entrance, I don't think it's not too healthy.
This conversation wouldn't be holistic if we don't talk about the issue of national carrier. You know, this has been laced with controversy even before now. You remember what happened during the last administration. Do you expect the minister to go this route? There are people who argue that Nigeria doesn't need a national carrier.
Well, I would say we don't need a national carrier. I think the real issue has been over the years that we have not been able to demonstrate the capacity to handle national business. And so they've all been grinded. Whether it's the shipping, whether it was in the electricity, whether it is in the telecommunication, every national infrastructure has not been well managed. And this is where a lot of people speak to our conscience or our belief, even in the project called Nigeria. Because many people don't believe in the project called Nigeria. Because this, for me, is the real critical issue. We have several airways. Where are they? They're gone. Lack of maintenance. People really don't care. We are building rail. We are seeing people vandalizing it. Sometimes you are asking yourself. Even manhole covers in Abuja, some people are removing it and selling it. This is the real issue. Value systems. Until you have the right values, investing in critical infrastructure at nation is like throwing money into the ocean. My own personal view.
You know, you talked about values, and you want to land.
Yes, I was just going to say, because that's why you can see somebody go to sign an agreement and come to brandish an aircraft, not properly sorted, and here we are. You see, this is the issue. Because if this guy had conscience, really, what exactly were they about to prove? Government is a continuum. It does not end with one regime. You start a project, somebody else finishes it. Why rush to conclude a project that is not finished? This is the issue. To say, oh, it was our regime that commissioned it. What does it really matter?
It doesn't.
They said you can get anything done if you really do not care who gets the praise. And the issue, the drive for praise among public workers is the greatest challenge that we face as a people.
I still want to speak to values that you mentioned earlier on. You remember the late Dora Akunyili when she was the Minister of Information, and she tried to rebrand the image of Nigeria. She came up with the mantra, good people, great nation. You know, did it really sell? Because you said people do not believe in the project called Nigeria. That's troubling to me.
Oh yeah, oh yeah. You see, we can deceive ourselves, but I think when facts are present, you'll be able to see these things that people really don't care about what happened to the project nation. So what is important to people is what they can get out of the nation. Now, and that's why it's the struggle, I keep saying, using the word, the struggle is always over who gets the largest chunk of the national cake. So it's not about service to the nation. It's about pillaging the nation.
How do you reverse this?
Now, this is where really leadership critical matters. That you need a leader who is their tribe, a leader who is not going to focus on an ethnic consideration and then will be seen to be nationalistic from the point of view of other ethnic nationalities. And once you can have that leader who is not prioritizing his ethnicity over and above other ethnic groups, then you will be able to see people beginning to think that there is something called Nigeria. Otherwise, this syndrome of our turn will continue. And so you're really asking yourself, turn to do what?
All right, let's go to the next story. Another Nigerian has made history with Guinness Book of Record. That's Tony Solomon. Is the new record holder for the most steps climbed on ladder while balancing a football on the head. It's looking like Idobasi has set the pace, and now young Nigerians are following the terrain, they are following the pace. A friend of mine jokingly said, he said it in Pidgin, if this Guinness Book of Record, if not physical book, Nigeria for don't tear the book. So what's your impression about this? Another good news coming from Nigeria, we have a new world record holder.
Well, for me, I think this nation, God blessed us. Not just with resources that are underground or above the ground, but even with human beings. We're not in scarcity of talented human beings. The issue has always been, how do we aggregate these multiple talents and begin to harness them for the national good? This has always been the issue. All communities have people who are excellent in one area or the other. But, of course, like they say, nepotism, favoritism that has taken the place and sacrificed merit has been our greatest undoing. So kudos to Solomon, great feat done.
Lots of Nigerians are really breaking records.
Yeah.
We have Linda Bachi, who broke the record recently for the longest cookathon.
Yeah.
She cooked for
Oh, yeah.
hours,
Yes.
and she had the support of Nigerians. So it's obvious that a success has so many friends.
Oh, yes, of course.
Maybe Idauza will break another record, the longest news analysis.
Oh, my God.
That would be good.
All right, let's move on to Malawi, where there's a plan to boost agricultural productivity, improve food security, and contribute to the country's economic growth. Now, Malawi is looking at the route of agriculture. We talk about diversification of revenue. I think it's a shift from the pattern where you have over-reliance on one source of income. What do you make of this, Idauza? Agricultural productivity, to diversify.
That's very critical. And I think every nation is beginning to learn this in a hard way. You remember, prior COVID, you could just transport goods and services to places. But immediately COVID came and the whole world was shut down. Everybody realized that, look, you're on your own if you don't provide for yourself. So even in desert places like the UAE had invested massively on hydroponic agriculture. They're doing vertical farming. Recently, over 10,000 tons of a wheat farm was harvested in the UAE. And so Africa that is blessed with good weather, good land mass that are favorable to agriculture, had no business looking for food from the outside. We should have food security, and that is important. Because, like they said, a man who is hungry is a man who is angry. And if we must tame all of these challenges that is facing us, the return of goods everywhere, we must ensure that people are eating and they are happy.
All right, a hungry man is an angry man. So that's your submission, and I think that's the way to wrap up this news analysis. Idauza, thank you for sharing your thought with us.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Vivian, thank you.
Thank you.
All right, we'll go on a short break now, then we'll give you more on early exchange. Stay with us. Yeah. All right, we're back for the discussion and we're looking at health tourism. In recent times, a lot of Nigerians have had reasons to travel abroad. That's what you call medical tourism. And we'll be analyzing this today. To share his perspective, we are being joined by Dr. Oladoyin Olubanjo, who is the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science. Dr. Olubanjo, thanks for joining us on Early Exchange this morning.
For having me. It's Odubanjo, if I may correct that. Can you hear me?
All right, if you can hear me, I would like you to talk to us. In recent times, in respect to your findings, why do you think we have higher rate of medical tourism in Nigeria?
Well, can you hear me? Let's first be sure of that. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. We can hear you. Thanks for joining us
Very
again.
good. Thank you. Thank you. So the reason why you have the medical tourism simply, again, aligns with the reason why you have the migration of health workers. So you can also look at the factors similarly. So when you look at migration of the health workers, we talk about the push and the pull factors. Which is that what is attracting people, which are the pull factors, and then what is driving them away. Those are the push factors. So even if they wanted to stay, is there something pushing them away? So the same way for the patients, the patients also, you look at it, what is attracting them to go outside, and then there are definitely also some factors that will push them away. But let's start with the push factors because on a good day, I would think that the pull factors, there are certain hindrances to that. For instance, cost, which means that people would ordinarily, proximity, easy access, and all of that. Those factors mean that people would ordinarily want to have their medical care where they are. If wherever you may live, for instance, you usually would want a health center that can attend to you nearby. You don't want your hospital, you don't want to live in a Ikeja, for instance, and have your hospital that you attend in Lekki, because if there was an emergency, even forget an emergency, in any situation of being unwell, you have malaria, you are really feeling sick, you don't want to have to, drive or get on a bus or even have somebody drive you all the way from Ikeja to Lekki. If somebody could drive you to a hospital in Ikeja, you will be happier. So the same way, it means that something is driving our people away. That's making them fly across borders for several hours, making them pay a lot of money because they're going to have to pay not just for the healthcare. When you have to go on health tourism, you probably have to pay for an accompanying person to go with you. You probably have to look for accommodation as well because you won't be in the hospital all of the time. You have to think about feeding and all of that. And all that you will be paying or spending in the expensive currency of those countries, so dollar, pound sterling, German francs, euros, you'll be spending a lot of money. So if people could access the healthcare where they were, they would. So why are they not able to access the healthcare? Number one, I mentioned earlier, the health workers and skills are disappearing. So people are also losing confidence. Where can I find the expertise that can take care of my condition? It looks like they are not here. Secondly, people are looking at the fact that even where I can find an expert, that expert, does he have the facilities he needs? Is he going to be doing surgery on me and then all of a sudden power goes off? I don't want to be at risk. So people want to go. Then people are looking at the fact that, look, if I need to go somewhere nearby, again, what are the logistics around it? How can I access that healthcare? Am I going to go to a hospital where I will be, sent up and down, or while I'm being taken care of, my relative himself or herself has to go through so much, in running around the hospital, go and pay here, go and collect receipt here, go and bring a bottle there, and all of that. So those are factors that people look at. They're looking at, can I access that expertise that I need easily, which includes the health personnel, as well as the tools and the environment that person needs to function effectively. And then they're looking at the general logistic arrangement around it. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Doctor. So Nigeria spent a total of 1.4 $4 million on foreign healthcare-related services in the first quarter of 2023. Now, this totals an increase of 40% from what was applicable in the previous year. This is massive, right? So you've been trying to dissect why people, travel to other countries. For example, take a look at the number of Nigerians that travel to India for medical care. We have very good doctors in Nigeria, but you also spoke to lack of facilities and lack of manpower. Talk to us about investment in Nigeria's healthcare sector by the government. Is government doing enough when it comes to budgetary allocation?
Well, I would say that the government definitely isn't hitting the budgetary goals, that have been agreed on different aspects of healthcare, provision in the country. There's a 15% budgetary allocation agreed on some years back. We have not been hitting that mark at all. But let's even just forget about the percentage budgetary allocation, and let's look at the effectiveness of what we have. Are we using it appropriately? Now, even what we budget doesn't mean it gets out and it gets to the hospitals and the places it's meant to be used for. So when you see a budget figure, the next question you need to ask the hospitals, ministries, and all that is, did you actually get that money to start with? And then you start talking about the utilization of the money. Now, when you begin to talk about this amount of money that is being spent on health tourism, what that tells you, and I like the fact that you are looking at the government side of things, okay? Because in the private sector, people are doing things, okay? They're trying to set up facilities that you can go to instead of going to India or wherever, so you'll still spend a lot of money, but it won't be as much as what you spend if you went to India. But the problem with that is that excludes a majority of Nigerians. So it's the government's responsibility to ensure that Nigerians as a totality, not just the very wealthy, can access some of these fantastic new facilities coming up because they're too expensive. So government facilities have to be adequate, okay? And in being adequate, you have to look at the total package. How much are we spending to retain the healthcare workers? Now, if you have $1.4 million disappearing abroad, the question to ask yourself is, what if I put in $1 million to strengthen what I have here, and I manage to retain the 1.4? I've made a gain of $400,000. That's what a businessman would think about. That's the business approach. So even as a government, that money that's leaving your economy is to the detriment of the economy. So you ask yourself, how much do we need to spend to strengthen the healthcare system and ensure that we stop losing foreign exchange? You must realize, and I hope I'm not speaking too much, that these are the issues we are all battling with in general. Why we are struggling with the strength of the naira as a whole is because we are spending too much, money. Too much money is leaving the economy and going abroad, and it's going in foreign currency. So we have too much money that's going from healthcare, going in education and all that, and people are spending money, that we need all of that foreign exchange, that pressure on our economy to find the foreign exchange and pay it abroad. We need to stop all of those things and look at we only need to spend a fraction of that, strengthen our own healthcare system, and we'll be able to trap that money and ensure it stops going out. Thank you.
Let's talk about this issue of brain drain and human capital flight when it comes to the health sector. A lot of medical experts are leaving Nigeria in droves to UK, to Canada, to US, even to India. Talk to us. What are the factors responsible for this? What are the critical issues? And what will be the likely impact of this on the Nigerian health sector?
Well, again, I mentioned the push and pull factors, but let me start from saying that we must understand that in any country, a majority of people, and of course of professionals also, would not migrate ordinarily. So in any country, most people love to be where they are. Human beings have what we call inertia. Human beings struggle with change. Okay, so people don't want to just live for living's sake. it means that takes us to those factors. What are those factors, like you asked? And usually we tend to divide them into push and pull. So this guy doesn't want to go. What is pulling him? Somebody is offering him more money. Yeah, that is correct. He's being offered an effective environment where he can work. One of the things people also miss out is that effective environment, the tools and the environment to work with. Because very often we forget that it's not pleasant to the healthcare worker to go to the hospital every day as a doctor, a nurse, or whatever, and watch people dying that he could have helped, except that he didn't have the tools to work with or the environment to work with. So they deal with a lot of psychological challenges. I know people who left the field, who left clinical work and said they couldn't deal, they couldn't cope, with seeing people dying that they knew this could have been solved, but the system didn't help them, So a place is offering that system, they want to go, they want fulfillment, in doing their work as doctors or whatever. And those are examples of pull factors. So the push factors are, I really don't want to go. And we're in a vicious cycle of sorts now, because we have a number of people leaving. And for everyone that leaves, so if you had, let's say, 10 doctors in a hospital, and look at many of our general hospitals, people are overburdened. They are saying, we know that the doctor-patient ratio in Nigeria is inadequate, but that's numbers that you deal with. That's just statistics. But if you go to the hospitals, the general hospitals, even you can tell that, oh, this doctor is going to see all of these people sitting there. So they are worked, overworked, overburdened. Okay. Now imagine that if there were 10 of them there and you think they were overburdened and 5 of them leave. And when those 5 leave, you do not replace them. Or if you have to replace, you are not replacing with people at the same skill level. Okay, which means the remaining 5 are going to be doing much more again than what they were already doing. That was too much. And then what happens? Those remaining 5 are going to start thinking, I can't continue like this. That's a push factor. So they too, they were not thinking of leaving, but now they start thinking of leaving, and soon enough they will leave. Okay, of course, if you sit there and you say, look, I'm a Nigerian, I'm patriotic, but you can't pay your rent, you're patriotic, but you can't pay school fees, you're patriotic, you're struggling with your car, and all of that, and you're looking at the future and you can't see it's going to get any better, then there's a huge problem. You are going to be pushed out of the system because you want to make ends meet. So those are push factors, or examples of push factors as we have them. Okay, so people are leaving and they live everywhere. I think somebody was speaking to the National Assembly recently and pointing out that they're not just going to the West, they are going to other African countries because those other African countries are treating them better and are giving them a better work environment.
Talking about treating them better, we have stories of people who complain that doctors have left stuff in them, like operated upon them and forgot some particular surgical equipments and all of that. And some have complained of how they're being treated poorly when they go to some of these medical facilities. Some Nigerians travel abroad just to go give birth and come back. And they say it's because of how they are handled over there. Also, some of these medical facilities abroad launder their image very, very well on the internet. Yeah, so how well have Nigerian hospitals and the healthcare system as a whole laundered its image to attract others from other countries and even keep the people we have in the country with them?
Well, 2 things. Number one, errors take place everywhere in the world. Okay, there are errors happening everywhere in the world. There are cases I've read of everywhere in the world. The truth will be that you minimize the errors, and they're more in certain places than others. And even some of those things that we've been speaking about will increase the errors. Okay, so if you put a man on duty, for instance, and he's attending to 10 patients, his effectiveness level ordinarily is going to be better than somebody who's going to have to attend to 200 patients that day. Okay, the likelihood that the guy dealing with 200 patients will make more mistakes is there just simply by the sheer burden of work that he has to carry, the stress, the tiredness that sets in. Okay, so systems, and that's part of the work environment that I'm also talking about. And it's when people are, in quote, less burdened and all of that, that they have even enough time to review systems, review protocols, sit down and analyze things, because those are things you do to improve systems. You have to have time to sit down and say, let's look at what we have been doing. Let's look at our protocols for dealing with this or that. Let's draft new protocols for everybody to follow. That means in that time you are doing all of that. For instance, if you were a clinician, you are not attending to patients at that time. You had enough time to take off and sit down and just brainstorm to write up protocols. But if you don't even have enough time for the patients, you are likely not to sit down and brainstorm on such things. Okay, that's one. The second one you were talking about is the laundering of the image. I think the new hospitals, the private ones, are trying to do some things better. However, one of the things we've had also are cake laws. We've had archaic laws that limited Nigerian doctors and co from advertising, you know, and it says there are certain limits even to the size of your signboard you can have and all of that. You can advertise yourself and expertise. Now, the other people are doing it while our people are afraid of running foul of the law. Even when they can provide some services, they can't do those things because there have been cases in the past in our law courts where doctors were sued for doing that. So we have things to address, and I'm happy you raised that. I know that, for instance, at least within the West African sub-region, we can boast of certain things, and we should be able to attract a patient chance even in our story state, as it were. However, those would be some of our limitations, the fact that we can't even advertise. But then again, be careful what you put out there, because when you put it out there, you have to deliver. Okay, and if you advertise and you say you can do this, you can do that, and then people come in, but then unknown to you, some of your critical workforce who actually have that expertise are about to leave your service. They're going to leave. People are resigning all the time, so they're about to leave and go to wherever. Your nurses are about to leave and go to wherever, but you have gone to advertise to people they should come. So there's also a certain degree of stability you must have for you to put yourself out there and say people should come to you. Thank you.
All right. There's a report suggesting that medical tourism is more peculiar to political elites, to politicians, public office holders. In recent times, you've seen head of nations, you see presidents traveling abroad for medical treatment. What should be the narrative as far as Africa is concerned? How do we correct this narrative for these leaders to set the example? Because the truth is, the medical tourism for these public office holders is at the expense of taxpayers' money. How do we correct this narrative and ensure that the leadership starts with them?
Well, there are two things there, or maybe a few things. Let me not just say two. Of course, if the leaders had faith in what they were doing, I usually would joke with people that if I was in government and held a very serious position of responsibility, like being a governor, and what I mean by that is that I have no excuse. The state is in my hand. It's up to me to fix the system and ensure that I have good service that can even offer me service confidently in my own state, forget the country as a whole. I say to people that if I was in that kind of position and I've been there for 2-3 years and I was sick, and I would be so ashamed if I had to go abroad, that I will ensure anybody who is with me must never call me governor, excellency, wherever in that hospital, because I'll be ashamed of it. I'll be ashamed of anybody asking me, how come you didn't fix the system in your own state? Okay. So what we need are two things, perhaps, maybe more. One are the enabling laws. Okay, the enabling laws, meaning that you cannot go abroad on government money for treatment privately. So that should be set in law. Unfortunately, even past government officials are usually flown abroad by government with government money as a sign of honor when they are sick. Now, we need to cut all that out, because if you look at what happened when we had the Ebola outbreak in 2014, when we had COVID in 2020, and everywhere was shut down, because with Ebola also, you couldn't travel abroad for treatment. Nobody's going to accept an Ebola patient abroad. What happened was that everybody, public and private, all stakeholders put their hands on them. Everybody was willing to deal with issues. Money was pouring in. What do you need in the hospital? What do you need here? Okay, how much do you need? And they were signing off on money and trying to fix the problem. Now, what we need is that kind of situation to be sustained beyond 3 months or 93 days in the case of Ebola. We need it to be sustained beyond a few months in the case of COVID. We need it to be sustained over several years, where everybody feels like I have nowhere to go but here. If I'm sick, I'll have to be taken care of here. So the enabling law has to be there. That if you had to travel, in fact, if it was possible, I don't know, the lawyers can advise us. If it was possible, as long as you choose to have or to hold a public office, even if it's your private money, it should be in the law that you are not allowed, to go abroad. That will ensure your commitment totally. So the second thing that follows that is enforcement. Meaning, are we really able to track? Because when you ask some of the people, what they will tell you is that it's my money. I can do anything I want to do with my money. It's not government money. But we never really know, whether it's theirs or not. So we must be able to track it and enforce it. And if we can do that, trap everybody within the system and trap especially the key decision makers within the system, that if you know that you cannot comply with that kind of rule or law, then please don't go for election to be a rep or commissioner or whatever, or governor. Don't go. Don't be elected. And if you were elected and you thought you didn't have health problems, but suddenly you develop serious health problems and you don't want to be treated in Nigeria, then you have to resign. Then we'll start solving our problems.
That's a safe place to land. Thank you so much for joining us on Early Exchange today, Doctor. Dr. Oladoyin Odubanjo is the Executive Secretary of the Nigerian Academy of Science, and we have been taking a look at medical tourism and how it affects Nigeria, and also what can be done to curb this menace. Thank you, Doctor, and have a very good day. So we'll take a short break, and when we come back, Early Exchange continues. Stay with us.
The healthcare economy has come a long way, evolving significantly since the late 19th century. Its mission is to protect people's health, promote economic growth, ensure social stability, foster innovation, and reduce financial risk associated with healthcare. This sector is made up of governments, healthcare providers, insurers, pharmaceutical companies, researchers, and the public. They work together to provide medical services and manage healthcare finances. One major challenge is that while healthcare is crucial, it can be expensive. People often struggle to pay for medical services, which can strain healthcare systems. Another challenge is the shortage of skilled healthcare workers like doctors and nurses to meet the growing demand for care. Additionally, public health crises like pandemics can disrupt healthcare and damage economies. In response to challenges, governments develop healthcare financing models, provide training for healthcare workers, and create plans to handle public health crises. On the brighter side, health research leads to medical breakthroughs, improving treatments and boosting economic growth. Also, health tourism, where people travel for medical care, can generate revenue for countries. These efforts ensure that healthcare continues to evolve and meets the ever changing needs of communities worldwide. Alfreda Ambe Bassi, Souk News.
Well, you're welcome back. It's still early exchange on Souk News. And we're going to be talking about economic impact of public health crisis. You know, pandemic-related restrictions disrupted global supply chains, inhibited investment, and interrupted labor markets, affecting the livelihoods of millions of people. Nigerians were particularly hard hit. You know, now the public health crisis has had dire economic consequences on a global scale. But Femi, before our guest comes on board, so many factors militating against, you know, healthcare in Nigeria, economy-wise, right?
Yeah. Remarkably, you will remember what happened in recent year, like a few years ago, when COVID, broke out. One of the remarkable things that happened in recent times and affected the public sector, the health sector, worldwide, not just Nigeria alone, was COVID-19. When it happened through, when it broke, a lot of people were concerned, especially for the developing world, the health sector, which has been vulnerable before COVID. And now people thought that Africa, you were going to record more casualties, but unfortunately it was the other way. And so perhaps maybe because of our resilient nature, and when it happened, a lot of knowledge wasn't, at play for people to be able to maneuver and be able to manage COVID. But eventually, Africa was able to scale through that era. So that made a remarkable change when it comes to the healthcare sector, because when you're talking about public health crisis, you're talking about the emergencies that arise. There are certain things that happen, they're call of nature that you don't have control over. People will break down, there will be sickness, there will be diseases, there will be emergencies. And that's what public health crisis is all about. And so the remarkable one that happened was COVID. And when it happened, a lot of people were concerned. Before Africa was being given the privilege of even getting the vaccines, it took a longer time, people were dying in droves. But that
people were not dying in droves in Africa. That's a very remarkable thing against predictions made by world leaders, including some very prominent businessmen like Bill Gates, where they predicted. I remember what Melinda Gates said on one of the TV stations, international, that they were projecting or they were foreseeing people, Africans, lying dead on the streets. It didn't happen. It was a miracle. Africans actually were not really hard hit by COVID-19 compared to other health crises like malaria, and Lassa fever and all of that. But the thing about a healthy population is that it increases productivity. In other words, a healthy population is healthy productivity when it comes to income per capita, right? Yes. I mean, Femi, will you be able to sit with me and, have us gist like this if you're cold or if you're shivering, if you're not feeling well, or if you don't have access to medical health care when you want to?
That's why it's important for the framework to be there, for people to have the right access to healthcare. In Nigeria, what is prevalent is you see people, sponsoring, taking care of their bills, unlike in the other part of the world. In other climes, you have insurance, you have HMO covering your expenses.
Which is part of what we are going to be discussing this morning.
Part of what we're going to talk about, But largely in Africa, a lot of Africans don't have access to healthcare. How affordable it is, even if you have access to it, the truth is a large percentage of Africans, even statistics have shown that a larger percentage of Nigerians can't even afford to go to a hospital. You see, most of the time you see them going to public hospitals because it's cheaper, it's affordable, unlike private sectors, because they have access to these facilities and they believe that you have more experts in those areas, and because of the funding and the finance. So majorly this has been a critical issue over the years. You remember when COVID happened, because we're also looking at the economic aspect of it, there was lockdown. A lot of people were
lockdown.
In fact, a lot of people were compelled to stay at home. Businesses were affected, small businesses, big business, even the big players were affected. A lot of workers were compelled to
working remotely. Yes.
Working remotely. In fact, that was when software became the rave of the moment. The use of Zoom. The use of several.
So some people cashed in on it.
Yes. And then it has been the order of the day. That's why even in the media world, they're driven by this software. Nigerians don't believe at a point that there will be a time there will be this general announcement that they should sit at home. And there are people who live on daily wages who can't afford to feed themselves until they go out.
Absolutely.
And they have to go out every day to earn living to feed their family. So that's just part of the economic aspect of it when you have public crisis, which is part of what we're going to look at. And so that happened at that time. In fact, COVID was just a big eye-opener for Nigeria, for Africa, the rest of the world, especially in the health sector, where some people believe that in the other parts of the world, the health sector is immune against that kind of outbreak, against that kind of public crisis. But it was an eye-opener that there's a need for every person in that sector to seek up. Interestingly, it was also an era where a lot of migration happened. We talk about health tourism. A lot of Nigeria, UK had to open the door for a lot of medical experts, Canada, US, for a lot of medical experts who come from Africa. And that happened, So remarkably, we discover that when public health crisis happens, it changes the narrative, it changes human behavior, it changes the environment, it even changes the sector itself. And that's why it's important for a government or federal government or state government to have plans in place to either take advantage or manage the situation when it occurs. And for me, as far as COVID was concerned, when it broke out, I think I give kudos to Africa.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I mean, and Nigeria too. I mean, we did so well when it comes to, containing the virus and all of that. You were talking about some of these crises, what it means. What does, a health crisis mean and how it impacts the populace, economy-wise. I remember a report I did on malnutrition, and in Maiduguri, you had people who needed to go to the hospital, but couldn't get to one very fast enough because hospitals were like 3, 4, 6 hours apart. That's dire. It's a very dire situation, and that's part of the health crisis. One of the things we are talking about, right? Yeah. Which is what we are going to be interrogating when our guests.
I remember I did a special report that was like 5 years ago, where I had to visit a community in the Niger Delta. This community, they as at then, they had one hospital, one healthcare facility. And for years, the facility has been abandoned. Reason being that the roads are bad. In fact, the access to that community was terrible. And so what happened at that point was the medical officials were not even there. They were delegated to work in that place, but because access to that city has been a problem, so they were abandoned over there. So you have a community of about 50,000 people at the mercy of one hospital, which is not even functioning. And so it was a big problem for them. So for them to be able to access healthcare facility, they will have to travel to the capital, which is the city, which is the closest to them. And so this has been the situation all around, and that's why the concern, there have been argument, agitation for healthcare facilities to be improved, especially public healthcare facilities, so that it will be at the mercy of people, and then anytime they need those services, they will be able to get access to it. You have a situation in that community that even the rich people in those communities at a point decided to leave that community rather than coming together to find a lasting solution to the problem, the healthcare problem in that community. Some of them felt, okay, I can just take care of myself and my family. A lot of the rich people in that community, they left that community. This was I just don't want to mention the name of that community for security reasons. So that was the situation. So that communal spirit wasn't there for them to fix the problem. And you see people dying in that community every day. They had to resort to these local medical practitioners, these native people to assist them. They have to depend on agbo, on herbs and all that for them to survive. So it's very critical. That's why the issue of health crisis is very. Another issue when it comes to public health crisis in Nigeria is the issue of malaria. It's very critical, and I learned our guest is ready, and I would like to put that to our guest. Thanks for joining us, Dr. Ben Ifeanyi. Dr. Ben, can you hear me?
Yeah. Yeah, good morning. I can hear you clearly. Can you hear me over there?
Glad to have you join us on Early Exchange. So we're looking at the economic impact of public health crisis. But as a background, I would like you to take us through some of the health crisis or the issues peculiar to public health as far as Africa is concerned. Talk to us from your experience. You've had cause to deal with several patients. You've done several research when it comes to these areas. I would like you to talk to us. What are some of the health crises that are peculiar to this continent as far as the public sector is concerned?
Okay, thank you very much. Thanks once again for having me. Africa definitely has some peculiar health crisis because of our economic development, the level of our economic development. So I'm going to start, however, by pointing to the definition of health. Health is not simply the absence of diseases. It is a
Dr. Ben, can you? Oh, it appears the network is not friendly. Vivian, he was about telling us some of the health crises that are peculiar to Africa. So we're talking that one of the things.
In fact, he was going to start by defining health. I'm very interested in that. Right? He was going to say health is simply not the absence of, and then he went there. So we're gonna let him land when he comes.
We'll be glad to have him.
But it's very, very essential for us to hear an expert define what health means. Right?
Let's talk about the issue of malaria.
Absolutely.
It's one of the health crisis or the challenge around this area because you have because of the environmental factor. Issue of malaria has been prevalent. What's your take on this?
Well, you talked about the temperature and all of that. It's tropical where we live. The region is a tropical region and all. But I think when it comes to the issue of malaria, a lot has been achieved compared to years ago where you had people dying of malaria. These days, there are so many measures that have been put forward to prevent malaria. You have nets, you have insecticides, you have awareness programs where people are told not to leave stagnant water around their houses. You have awareness programs as well, telling people clean your gutters, so you don't have mosquitoes patching around. So I think when it comes to the issue of malaria, a lot has been done. And then there's been talk of, a vaccination for malaria as well, like what you had with COVID. So, yeah.
All right, we'll go on a short break now. And when we return, we'll have more discussion in respect to public health crisis. Stay with us.
You're welcome back. We are going to take another short break, and when we come back, we will be bringing our guests on board. Stay with us. You cannot put me on the spot, oh, you, whoever.
All right, it's still early exchange and we're looking at the ed sector. Our focus has been on the ed sector. Earlier we talked about the importance of having to understand the economy of the ed sector, and now we're looking at the public health crisis that has ravaged that sector. A lot of things have happened in that sector over the years. A few years back we had the issue of COVID, and now a lot of health issues have happened. And now we're being joined, we're reconnecting with Dr. Ben Ifeanyi. Dr. Ben, glad to have you join us once again.
Okay, thank you very much.
All right, before we had you were trying to talk about
thank you very
health
much.
crises that were peculiar to Africa, to this continent. That was what you were talking about. I would like you to conclude your thought in that regard for you to do an overview of some of the health crises peculiar to Nigeria and by extension, Africa.
Okay, thank you very much. Now, I start by defining health before network did cut us off. Health is not just the absence of disease or, as people put it, sickness. Health encompasses both physical, social, and mental well-being. So it's a total concept. Now, in Africa, we have diseases that are peculiar to us. Those that come once in a while, what we define as epidemics. Take, for example, the the COVID epidemic we had. But currently, our challenges here, especially in sub-Saharan Africa, could one include communicable diseases like tuberculosis, HIV/AIDS. Um, then come to the other side, non-communicable diseases like the rising incidence of diabetes, hypertension. We also have challenges. So these are challenges with rate of maternal mortality. So these are challenges we deal with here in Africa.
Okay, Dr. Ifeanyi, you defined health and you said it's simply not an absence of disease. It's a wholeness thing. You have to be whole mentally and physically as well. I'm glad you said that. Now, we are talking about the economics of it, right? Health contributes positively to economic growth and it also
Yeah.
mitigates the effect of poverty, right? Let's talk about the impact of health on life expectancy in Nigeria. At the moment, life expectancy is 64.4 years. Is that an improvement or is it negative?
Okay. It's an improvement. It's an improvement. Governments over the years have increased funding for healthcare. Public advocacy programs have increased. So now we've noticed a steady increase in our life expectancy. However, it's still behind other countries. Advanced countries have a life expectancy close to the 80s, so there's still a whole lot of work to do. Now, when people are ill, it affects the economy through varying means. First, productivity declines. Take, for example, one of the endemic things we deal with here in Nigeria is the issue of malaria. So people have missed work days. Even when they are at work, they have declining productivity. So this affects the GDP. It's estimated $1.5 billion per year from work-related losses, absenteeism, decreased productivity for people, just something as simple as malaria. So a healthy nation is usually a prosperous nation. If you look at the malaria belt, you see that productivity is low in those countries. And some experts have linked that to decreased productivity from recurrent ill health. So health is wealth, as people put it.
According to a report by an aid agency where they identify some of the issues related to public health in Nigeria, part of what was stated is the issue of drug abuse and alcohol. I would like you to talk to us about how serious this is as far as Nigeria is concerned. The use of drugs and alcohol has also contributed to public health crisis according to these findings. I would like your take on this and then talk to us how huge or the impact of this on the health sector and the society at large. Dr. Ben, I hope you can hear me. If you can hear me, my question is, there's this survey done recently about some of the public health crisis ravaging the Nigerian health sector. And one of the critical things that was identified
Okay.
is the issue of drug abuse, alcohol. And I would like you to talk to us about the impact of this and when it comes to the issue of drug, then as far as the society is concerned at large.
Okay. Thanks. I can hear you now. Now, drug abuse it's a rising epidemic. There's a new onset problems we have to deal with within the health sector in Nigeria. Alcohol has always been there. However, it's the number of people using or abusing alcohol is increasing. Currently, a study was released that said there is no safe level of alcohol consumption. This alcohol has been linked to varying diseases from the commonest, which is liver challenges, to cancer, same as drug abuse. Now, we have young people who should typically be productive. Uh, However, they consume drugs. Now, In the acute phase, they have health challenges. Some of them come down with strokes. Now, on the long term, what happens? Your productivity drops. So it's estimated that the decrease in productivity from drug abuse and alcohol consumption is getting close to about 0.5% of our gross domestic product. So it's a challenge that should be tackled head on. The National Drug Law Enforcement Agency is doing lots of things in that regard. However, information, primary prevention remains key. So we need to keep informing people about the community level, in the churches, in the bars, that this alcohol consumption at no level is safe for them. And the economic impact on the health, short-term, long-term productivity.
Okay, so the educational level someone has is one of the socio-economic factors that affect health in Nigeria. What are others, Dr. Ifani?
Okay. What about this first, this socioeconomic level? Poverty is one of the greatest factors that affect health in Nigeria. Now, our health system operates on pay as you go. Like you walk into the hospital today, if you're not under insurance, you have to pay out of pocket. So out of pocket spending is about 70-80% of our healthcare system. Now, considering that a great majority of Nigerians live under the poverty line, they cannot afford out of pocket spending. So, before the present to the hospital, they've gone to roadside chemists, they've gone to unlicensed traditional healers. So by the time the present to the hospital is readily economic factors. So the government recently signed down the law, the revamped NHIS Act that was last year, that makes health insurance mandatory. So the government needs to build on that just insurance, not just making it mandatory. There's a provision for reform to take care of those who cannot afford to pay the premiums. If health insurance becomes universal, then we would have tackled one of the major reasons for late presentations at the hospital. Secondly, you mentioned education. If you do not educate people, they wouldn't fully appreciate the steps in there to take care of their health. For example, we advise people to have 30 minutes of exercise at least 3 times a week. Why? Because of their hearts. But then, without this, people do not know. Without education, people do not know. We advise people no alcohol consumption because of the liver and the risks of cancer. So socio-economic factors, one, education. So these are major factors that affect health. Now, others include the manpower challenge, like the earlier speaker talked about, manpower challenges, Nigerian doctors seeking green pastures overseas, inadequate training. So these are other challenges. The first, economy, two, education. Then we can list other challenges as we walk down.
Okay, I'll still make reference to the medical report I talked about earlier, which identified the issue of cancer and mental illness as part of the crisis ravaging Africa. I would like you to also react to this. It was identified the issue of cancer and mental disorderness, mental health has been of concern in recent time. And this report suggests that it's part of the crisis ravaging the health sector in Nigeria. What's your take on this?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. In the past, I made reference to the fact that we have communicable diseases like the ones we know, the tuberculosis, the HIV. However, non-communicable diseases are beginning to rise, and their incidence is beginning to rise and now become a problem here in Nigeria. I mentioned the epidemic of hypertension, diabetes. Now you've brought in now, remember the definition I talked about, that it's health is like the total well-being of a person, physical, mental, social. So that's what we're dealing with. So now we're seeing lots of cases, people coming down with depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation. I recently saw a a sad story of a man who jumped into the river, Lokoja River, somewhere in Kogi State. That happened early last week. So there are challenges, and people, there's still a stigma surrounding.
Okay, we lost Dr. Ifeanyi. We will work towards getting him back. In the meantime, he was talking about mental health, which is very, very crucial, which speaks to what he talked about at the onset, defining health as not simply the absence of diseases, but being a holistic issue. Femi, you brought up the issue of mental health.
Yeah.
And it is essential, right?
It's a serious thing. It's very crucial. You know, this report did a holistic, survey about the public health crisis in Africa. And then apart from malaria, apart from cancer, one of the things that was identified is the issue of mental health. And you, unfortunately, in this part of this world, people don't seek help when it comes to that. People prefer to be quiet or to keep to themselves because of the fear of what people will say. But there's a need for people to start talking about it. There are experts who can handle it. In the reverse, rather than seeking medical help, people go to their pastors, people go to their counselors to seek for help and all that. But it's also important for people to know that when it comes to mental health, it's important to seek the opinion of an expert. And that we have Dr. Ifeanyi back. Earlier you were making reference to the medical report that I talked about, and you were sharing your thoughts in regards to cancer and mental health. We would like you to continue your thoughts.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry, the disruption from the network. So, back to what I was saying about mental health. First is the stigma. In the past, people think mental health is just about someone being mad and running around the street in tattered clothes. No, mental health is all encompassing, from anxiety to depression. There was a study carried out. We found out the rate of anxiety among young people has tripled. Same with depression. So we're dealing with mental health here. So first, we deal with the stigmatory information. People should be afraid to speak out. I was talking about a sad story of someone jumping into the stream some days back, committing suicide because of challenges with mental health. So now, first, information, like I always talk about, information, informing people that mental health doesn't mean you're mad. Feel free to look for support. Two, manpower capacity. We need to improve the number of psychologists and psychiatrists in Nigeria. Now, coming to cancer, as information has improved, we're collecting more data. We've noticed the rising incidence of cancer here in Nigeria. Why? We've adopted certain lifestyle changes. The fast food lifestyle change, the behavioral lifestyle changes like smoking, the fact that we do not have fiber in our diets, we just eat all fast food. The fact that lots of the food we have, some of them have some preservatives that might be carcinogenic. So seeing that the rate of breast cancer, prostate cancer is beginning to rise, especially in Nigeria. So it's a new public health concern. So first, information, lifestyle modifications. Two, early screening. For people who have a risk of cancer in their family, one of the things we do for them is to tell them to come to the hospital early, bring them early for cancers, because some of this are genetically transmitted. So this is important. So first, education. We cannot underemphasize education. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Ifeanyi, I'm going to take you back to the socioeconomic factors when it comes to health, right? You mentioned the NHIS, which is the nation's national insurance scheme, right? I was going to ask you, who is eligible for the NHIS?
Okay, from the new law, everyone, me and you, everyone is eligible.
Okay.
The new law was signed in the year 2022. The new law was signed in the year 2022. That's the updated NHIS Act. Now, everyone is eligible because the previously less than 10% of the population was covered by NHIS. But currently, the new acts ensures that everyone, it's mandatory for me and you to have an insurance. So what is done is those under the civil service, we pay premiums. The government takes premiums, the form of tax to cover for that. Now, those in communities can come together and pay certain premium yearly to cover for them. Now, for the underprivileged and the poor, the government has set up a fund to pay the premium for them. So everyone is covered under NHS once you're a citizen or a legal resident in Nigeria. Are there challenges in meeting the goals? Yes, but currently the law mandates me, you, everyone to have insurance.
All right, you said that it's mandatory for us to have a health insurance, but there's a survey that shows that 8 out of 10 Nigerians, you know, do not have health insurance. I'm sure that report will be mind-blowing to you. Now, I want us to look at why do we have this kind of figure? It's looking like less than 10% of the population of, as far as Nigeria is concerned, have access to health insurance. Talk to us, what are the underlying problems and why do you have this kind of development? 8 out of 10 Nigerians do not have access to health insurance. That's serious. What do you
Okay,
think?
thank you very much. Yeah, like I earlier alluded to that less than 10% was covered by the NHS in the past, which was a challenge. So that's why the government tried to rejig it and passed the new law in 2022. Got signed into law by the president. So yes, one, education. If you walk along on the street and then they random, you know that you're answer. Like she'll have no idea. Now, so first is information. We need to go down
Oh, we lost connection with Dr. Infrain. Vivian, let's. Okay, Dr. Infrain, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. So I find this report mind blowing. I find it disturbing. 8 out of 10 Nigerians do not have access to health insurance. Now, in fact, the survey went further to talk about methods being devised by Nigerians, you understand, to be able to finance their health issue, which is paying out of their pocket. The report says 80% of Nigerians pay out of their pocket to finance their health crisis. Unlike the other client, where you rely on insurance, you rely on insurance cover to cover that kind of expenses. Okay, Dr. Ifeanyi is back with us. You were talking about the issue of health insurance, and I made reference to the report or the survey done by NOI where they say 8 out of 10 Nigerians do not have access to health insurance. Please continue your line of thought in this regard.
Okay. Okay, can you hear me now? Can you hear me now? Looks like network is a bit bad. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Dr. Ifeanyi, very well. We can hear you. Please go ahead with your thought.
Oh, okay, thank you. Like I was saying, I earlier alluded to when we were talking initially, but the fact that NHIS has just covered less than 10% of the population. And I identified the gap. The gap was that of information. People are not aware that insurance is mandatory for them, and they're not aware of the benefits of healthcare insurance. So that is the challenge. Now, the NHIS has started. I visited a program a day, not a health-related program, just a gathering of people, a mini party, and then NHIS officials came there and started talking to people. Said, give us 5 minutes. Let's tell you about what the government intends to do for you. So first, the gap is information. So if we bridge the gap of information, then we'll get more people enrolled into the NHIS system. So that is the challenge: information and education. So the NHIS will have to do more in informing people. Healthcare funding is typically challenged, but countries have adopted the social insurance program like NHS rather than the pay out of pocket because it ensures better results.
All right. Now, what kind of policy do you expect to be put in place by the federal government to ensure that Nigerians have proper access to health insurance? Because it's looking like if government doesn't do anything about this, the problem is going to linger for a while. I would like you to talk about what kind of policy do you think can be put in place to ensure that the figure is improved. If you talked about less than 10% having access to health insurance. So we've been talking about the problem. Now let's talk about the solution. What do you expect that the federal government will do in this regard to ensure that this wouldn't be a challenge anymore?
Okay, thank you very much. Now, looking at the solution to the challenge for one, since we've identified the gap being that of information, one, I think the National Orientation Agency, not just the NHI, should launch a campaign. One, a campaign that tackles um, that that targets the rural and urban community, the market women, the people who are not under formal employment. So first, a campaign to let everyone know that you should have an insurance, and the government has created avenues for that. Information is power. So now, if people know that the market association, like let's say a market association from Central Market comes together, list all their members, pays a certain amount of money, they'll be covered for a year. So one, they should know that. Two is the issue of manpower. If we're going to ensure that insurance becomes mainstream, we need to make sure that we have manpower at the grassroots because the first place people go to is the primary healthcare center.
Okay,
So first, training of manpower from community health extension workers to nurses to doctors. So information, manpower. The government has already created the enabling law. So now it's to ensure that the law applies and then create the necessary manpower to deal with the increased load of patients.
thank you so much, Dr. Ifeanyi. We have been speaking to economic impact of public health crisis. Dr. Benifani is a medical Nigeria-based medical doctor based in Nigeria. We'll take a short break, and when we come back, early exchange continues as we speak to healthcare financing and insurance proper.
on social media, many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. We had a very interesting session, and in one of the sessions, there was a role play about a case study on CWG PLC, which is a company that I founded. And the case was written by Columbia Business School to discuss a point about venturing, about entrepreneurship, and about funding for the enterprise. And the case ended on a question: should Austin Okere take the venture capital investment, or should he reject it? Just a little bit of background. So this is a company, CWG, in 2005 that was doing very well. It was riding on the back of the Y2K that just happened at the turn of the century, was riding on the back of the telecom boom that happened immediately after the civilian government of OBJ and GSM was launched, was riding on the back of the bank consolidation in 2005 that was done by Governor Soludo. And in each of these booms, CWG had positioned and taken good advantage. So this is not a company that was in dire need of cash or was desperate in 2005. But we had a plan to list our shares on the stock market, and we thought that the best way to do it was to first do either a private placement, or better still, to do a venture capital fundraise so that they will bring discipline into our operations, governance, strengthen our governance, and of course, bring more technical knowledge. And if people saw that this company was invested in you, probably it will make the listing on the stock exchange more attractive. The issue here is at what price? And I remember that I've discussed something similar on this on social media, where many Nigerian young companies were celebrating, wow, we raised Series C, we raised Series D. And anytime they raised these monies, everybody hailed them. But what was behind it? What is behind every raise is that the entrepreneur founder is diluted significantly. So if I use CWG as a case study, the case that was written by Columbia was that there was an offer of $8 million for 25% of the company, putting the valuation post at $32 million. Make no mistake, the Treasury bill's interest rate is 15% sometimes. Now, if someone is going to bring his money to invest in your company, he's looking for way more than that 15%, given that there's a high risk that his money will not come back. And the rule of thumb is that they're looking for 3 times what they brought in within 5 years. So in our case, they were going to be asking for $24 million within 5 years, or you list and give them a liquidity event or an exit. You have to check very well that this $8 million that you're taking in, you can do business in such a way that the value of the company can cough out $24 million in 5 years, regardless of exchange loss. Here is where it gets complicated. So you receive $8 million, which is converted to you in Naira. 2005 probably was about 130. Now, whether the Naira suffers devaluation or not, you're going to pay that $8 million. Now, paying $8 million, 5 years later, where the Naira is maybe 250 or 260, whilst you are generating your revenue in Naira, becomes almost impossible. And if the venture capital firm then has to take assets because you can't pay, he will end up owning, of course, a big chunk of your company, nothing at all. You begin to look like a management staff in the company you founded. So in our own case, we held out and we didn't take the money. And in 2009, when we took a subsequent one, the company was valued at $55 million, plus that there'd been an exchange loss. So the company was valued much more than the $32 million, and plus the fact that in Naira terms, they would have owned more of our company. My point being, don't sell your seed. Rather, till your seeds, let it grow into a fruit, and sell at the fruit because the fruit is plentiful. A lot of our startups rush out to sell their seed and they sell it cheap. To complete that story, we actually then listed the company in 2013 for $90 million. Now, I did a rough calculation. If we were in dire need of money and we borrowed $8 million at an interest rate of 20%, at that time, Naira, we'll be returning Naira money and we'll be returning something like, even if you take 100%, we'll be returning another $8 million in 5 years' time. But given that the company's valuation had gone to $55 million in that time, 2009, when the second PE company invested, we would have been better off taking the debt because we'll be returning an extra $8 million rather than 8 times 3, which is 24, that would have had to give $24 million that would have had to pay the VC company if we had taken the money at that time. So the delta is huge in terms of debt versus equity. So the point is, at some point in time, equity seems cheap, deceptively, but debt is cheaper. Especially at the early stages, what you have is a seed. You don't sell your seed. Have patience, hone it, bootstrap it, take debt to finance specific deals, makes you disciplined, and then when you have your fruit, you can then invite investors to come and you make more and you don't lose a huge percentage of your company. You actually do still own a huge percentage of your company. Be patient. Don't rush out to collect funds and celebrate it. You will have to pay back. Thank you.
It's still early exchange and the focus has been on the health sector in Nigeria and as far as Africa is concerned. Earlier we had a conversation as regards the public health crisis in Nigeria, and now we want to talk about health financing. We want to talk about health insurance in Nigeria. The question is, how many Nigerians have access to health insurance as far as Africa is concerned and by extension the whole continent? Now we're being joined by Dr. Ben, I beg your pardon. We're being joined by Dr. Chidi Ukandu. He's the MD CEO, International Health Management Services Limited. Dr. Ukandu, glad to have you join us.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to be here.
I'm so sorry for that mix-up. We had Dr. Ife here, so
no problem.
that name stuck.
No problem.
Glad to have you join us once again.
Thank you.
I would like you to speak to this report. Earlier we had Dr. Ife where we were talking about the issue of insurance, and I'm glad you are here now to shed more light on it. Now, this report states that 8 out of 10 Nigerians do not have access to health insurance. How do you feel?
If you're talking about feeling, I mean, for anybody, that is, we should feel very bad about it. So it's not something that will gladden anybody's heart. Now, the question then, I would think, will be, why should that be the case? It's a little bit of a long story. But it can be compressed in such a way that we'll be able to still communicate what exactly some of the challenges that have actually kind of limited this country to being able to ensure that even if it's not 10 out of 10, but let's say 8 out of 10 people actually have access to healthcare services. Yeah. Now, one of the fundamental factors, or rather inputs, that is needed for you to have a working healthcare system is funding. Now, funding of healthcare in Nigeria has been abysmally low. Currently, I think it's about 4% of the budget. Between 4 and 5%. It was at the time 5%, 6%, but has just hovered about between 4 and 5%. Presently, I think it's about 4%. And this is contrary to a declaration by the African Union in 2005, where it was agreed that 15% of each nation's budget should be allocated to healthcare. But for one reason or the other, we have not been doing that. Now, healthcare financing itself is derived from about 4 sources. One, the governments, as the federal and state governments. You have donors. You have health insurance, which actually kicked off fully in 2005 during the Olusegun Obasanjo administration to add more funds to it, and then private individuals. Unfortunately, private individuals out of pocket contribute more than 60-something% of healthcare funding in Nigeria. And that has implications, very serious implications. The implications are that people are being forced to pay for healthcare services that out of their own pocket. And what that means is that the poorer group of people are bound to suffer, because oftentimes you find that 10% of their total expenditure may go to healthcare expenditure. And if that happens, we call it catastrophic funding, in the sense that, one, it would lead them into poverty. They are bound to sell their properties and things. In fact, you build a vicious circle, because once you enter that poverty roller coaster, or you cycle, you find that it's poverty, it keeps on compounding. And again, it has also a negative effect on their health status, because one, productivity would not be there. You won't get good productivity from them. Now, if you ask me why is it that, okay, government is only, because that's a very tough question for me, because I'm not in government, and the idea is that health, in fact, if you look at all the other areas that we definitely, that should be attended, given much more attention than others, health should actually be highly prioritized. Health, education, and all that. But as it is, like I said, what we have now, there's underfunding, and again, so many other issues surrounding how healthcare systems are managed in another sense. Those are other challenges which may fall out of what we are discussing now. But on the issue of health financing, we have inadequate financing of the health system.
Among others, right? Among other things.
Among other things.
So, the low percentage of Nigerians insured by the NHIS, which you alluded to, that's the insurance scheme, among other things, led to the creation of the National Health Insurance Authority Act. Act,
Yeah.
which was passed by the National Assembly in 2021 and assented to by President Muhammadu Buhari in 2022. You know, this launched an inclusive healthcare system in Nigeria. Walk us through the key provisions of this act and its implications for employees, employers, and government agencies.
Prior to the passage of that, the act, that was, I think, the early part of this year, I think sometime in April or so.
Passage of the act was in May.
Yeah, in May.
Yeah, was in May.
Was in May. So, essentially, prior to that time, the NHIS, the act establishing the NHIS, was, one, it was not mandatory. It was not mandatory on any, it was not mandatory. And it was only by government fiat, the federal government fiat, the then president, Olusegun Obasanjo, who said all the federal civil servants should register for health insurance, where 10% of their salary will be paid by government and they will contribute 5%. Okay, now, it wasn't mandatory. What that means essentially is that, I mean, if you want to participate, you participate. So there is really no way for you to say that you have a very solid law guiding health insurance. That was one factor. And that was one of the major things, actually, there was a lot of push from that time. In fact, even before then, pushing to make it mandatory so that even the private sector, even those who are employed, I mean, even lesser number of people will be able to, by law, buy health insurance. Because in practically all countries where you have universal health coverage, it is by law. If you take UK, for instance, there is no way you cannot contribute to health insurance. There's just no way. Even as a high school, I had some stints in the UK too. Even as a student, I had my, they call it NI something or whatever. Yes. And I even enjoyed and benefited from it because unfortunately I had to have a surgery and all that. And it was only possible because they were taking some part of my contributions to the government as contributing to the health insurance scheme. So this has been going on, and there's been a lot of agitation, a lot of movement pushing and all that. Eventually, the new law was passed, was signed by the then president. And there are about 4 things actually he did. One was to make the law now mandatory for everybody in Nigeria. So far as you're a resident in Nigeria, you must take up health insurance. Another fantastic thing that was put into the law was the fact that about 83 million indigent, let me call them indigent Nigerians, vulnerable actually is the word, yes, that's a vulnerable fund, provision for financing 83 million. And that would actually go a long way in covering quite a larger number of Nigerians, because for God's sake, if you have a poverty level of about more than 60-something%, how are those people going to buy insurance? So that law, that aspect of the law definitely would help in allowing this set of Nigerians to have access to healthcare services. I think those 2 major things, and then of course the restructuring of the healthcare system generally, wherein like the law is going to be implemented through the states. in terms of, so that at the end of the day, everybody is touched, particularly as it has to do with the vulnerable population. And of course, it also made it mandatory, really, for if you employ 5 people and above, you must pay, you must actually subscribe for the set of people. And individuals too, everybody is mandated to have. Now, one of the challenges there, of course, has to be how do you implement it? Because we may go into that later.
Absolutely.
Because that will be
that's one of the challenges.
That's another challenge there. So far, just to add this, the law has not actually been effected, because usually when you draw up a law, there are guidelines. The National Health Insurance Authority, as it is known now, has been working on the guidelines, and we are all expecting to see the guidelines. We were also involved in producing the guidelines, but it's not yet out. Once it's out, then we will now talk about implementation and see how that would help to improve the current state of financing and health insurance.
If you're going to be in position to advise or put your advice, how do you think the implementation can be done? Because I just don't want us to leave that discussion. Now it's been signed into law, and now a few months down the line, we're still waiting for the guideline and all that. How do you think this can be achieved, whereby the translation will happen between what is on paper and what is coming to reality?
I think, like in all things, if proper structures are in place. For instance, let's look at the funding. If you have a separate fund where all those monies are paid into and managed by a kind of independent body, that kind of secures that fund and also allows for accountability. Now, that is one step of it. Now, if the money is used for what is meant to be used for, because the truth about it is that there are challenges even state by state, because by the Constitution, health is on the concurrent list. However, what I think this law has done is to kind of place health insurance actually more like it's not that concurrent anymore. Every state must participate. But even at that, a lot of states have challenges, big challenges, even setting up the structures and all that. So it's not even a question of maybe assuming, let's even assume, look at the situation of the economy as it is now. The question you ask yourself is, we are, based on the last reports I got, we are practically, our debt, our debt situation is like, where is the money going to come from? But I believe our government is highly innovative. They would definitely find a way, even if it is to, at least, because for God's sake, it is a very important aspect of the development of this nation. If you don't sort that problem out, it will still be holding you back. There is no way. If you ask me personally, like you asked, how, basically, like I said, we need to first and foremost place health where it is supposed to be. Because I think for you to achieve much in anything you want to do in life is first and foremost prioritization, clear prioritization, and focus and determination to say, okay, I want to do this. It happened in so many countries. Thailand, Singapore, same thing. It's like the government took it as this is like it's like an emergency situation is being declared. Let us focus on this and get our people, all of them, having access to health care services. So to a large extent, the political will is very, very necessary. And then being able to set up structures that are institutionalized, very, very important. And I tell you, it's not so difficult, as far as I'm concerned, if once we put our mind to it that this is what we want to do. There are challenges. Let us not rule out that fact. We are at a situation in the country now that, look, we are almost at rock bottom. But then, they say a man who is down has no other place but to. So the way I see it, I see a situation where government has to take the bull by the horn and then do what is needful, and then I'm sure we will be back on track.
Absolutely. You know, earlier on you said you were part of, the process of producing a guideline for the NHIA Act. I was wondering if you could give us a scoop, since we have you here.
No. Like when I said I was, we have Association of Health Maintenance Organizations. I happen to be a member. Some of our members were in the, so not me directly. So
that's a very smart way of breaking out of it.
We're hoping you give us the exclusive.
Yeah, but what are what are the likely things we are to expect?
No, when you look at guidelines, to a large extent draw from the law.
Okay.
And the law, the way it is designed, which you probably, I would, maybe if you don't have one, I'll get you a copy. It's designed in such a way that ideally, if followed to the letter, the guidelines are just like being specific, okay? You do it this way, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, instead of just broad statements and things like that. So we are talking of having coverage for all Nigerians. We are made mandatory and all that. So we have to find a way within the guideline to specify how to make this possible. And that brings me to another aspect. You see, passing laws in Nigeria or policies has never been our problem. It has never been our problem.
Yeah.
The issue is, one of the challenges is in the implementation. Now, in several fora that I have had the opportunity to discuss, I said one of the biggest challenges that we're going to have with this law is enforcement. Paint a scenario in your eyes. You are supposed to have health insurance, and because you are working here and you are registered with various statutory bodies and all that, it's easy. What if you run one shop somewhere, you are not, what they call maybe the black economy or whatever? How do we make sure that everybody contributes? What kind of, because there will be need to have, it's just like you have your third party, motor insurance. Well, how do think of it? How does government ensure that people pay or take up third-party insurance. Police is involved. They can stop you on the road and ask for your particulars. Check for your particulars. They say that insurance is not there. Then you can. So, are we going to do the same thing for health? Of course, there are ways where, for instance, if you want to open an account, if you want to have business to do with government or whatever or something, or you want to maybe let one of the government facilities for you to trade or whatever, I mean, those are ways where for you to do that, you must have your health insurance certificate. So, but again, there are other factors too that you also think about. The political aspect of it. How do the people feel? This, that, and all that. But the truth about it is that the law is drawn up and it said it's mandatory. It is for the NHIA and the Ministry of Health to work out the details of how to ensure that the law is enforced.
All right, we're due for another break, and when we return, we're still going to have more discussion with Dr. Okando. He's still here with us in the studio, and that will be after this short break. Stay with us.
Thank you.
As far as early exchange is concerned, it's all about conversation, and conversation. And today's conversation has been health insurance. And we still have Dr. Chidi Ukando with us in the studio, who has been talking about what it takes to sustain the health insurance and financing in Nigeria and as far as Africa is concerned. Dr. Ukando, I would like you to, earlier you talked about your experience in the UK. I would like you to do a kind of contrast between the approach to health insurance or health financing in UK to that of Africa. What are the things we can imbibe? What are the lessons? Looking at the scheme, if we compare the two ends, what are the lessons we can imbibe? What are the things we can adopt as far as Africa is concerned?
Why I smile?
You actually laugh.
I laugh because the truth about it is that I think by now we all know what we ought to do. Yeah. Because, I mean, for God's sake, I don't think there is any top-level Nigerian who hasn't traveled outside this country, stayed some time, being able to see what the health systems are like. Apart from America, most countries, developed countries in the world, have universal health coverage.
Yes.
And it goes back to what I said earlier. The realization that without health, there cannot be productivity. There cannot be serious productivity. They took it as that understanding of that fact and derived means wherein it's like, for God's sake, let's even say it truthfully. It is almost impossible there are few governments that you can say that they can pay for health care of their people on their own without contribution by the people. And in fact, the contribution by the people also shows their own appreciation of the fact that health is important for them, because there are things about things that are free. When things are free, you don't value them. So there are two sides to the equation. You can't just talk government. Government has its own part to play. The people also have their own part to play. What has happened is that a culture of health consciousness have been built into the people. And then the structures to support that has also been established. You find, even in the US, where there are issues about healthcare coverage and all that, you have Medicaid, you have Medicare to take care of those who are poor and take care of those who are elderly and all whatnot and all that, enshrined in the Constitution, and those are paid, they are paid. Other countries like UK adopts a tax system whereby as you are paying your tax, you are also paying for your contributing. The wonderful thing about health insurance is this. You all just need to contribute little amounts. Mm-hmm. All of us don't fall ill at the same time.
No, we don't.
Yes. And if we are able to pull that money together, it's easier to pay for healthcare. It's not rocket science. So our learning first starts from appreciating that fact that health is, like they say, health is wealth. Mm-hmm. Once your people are healthy, can think well, for God's sake, they can achieve a lot. Mm-hmm. And it relieves one kind of stress. Imagine, I said it before, a country where more than 60% live below the poverty line. What do you think will happen? It's not rocket science. It's a question of prioritization. It's a question of deciding that, okay, because in actual fact, it does involve so many other factors, because you have to look at it that you are spending on health, you're also looking at security, you're also looking at education. So the country itself has to be structured in such a way that it realizes the importance of all this and places, priorities and necessary structures to support that possibility of people, everybody, having access to healthcare. That is the major challenge we are facing now.
So what I hear you say is placing premium on the value of lives and then having a functional system.
Yes.
Okay, so you alluded to funding being decentralized earlier on. I want us to take a look at this. Funds management it has been transferred from health maintenance organizations to state health insurance schemes, and the health maintenance organizations are now excluded from the governing council. In a nutshell, what does this mean?
No, that's I think you're getting it totally mixed up.
Okay.
Now, when you talk of health financing broadly, where does the funding for health come from? Government contributes some portion of it. Like when you see they give grants, like most of the teaching hospitals and all that are funded largely by hospitals, by government. Salaries are paid by them. Now, we have donors who donate, UNICEF, WHO, USAID and all that. They make donations for particular programs and things and all that. Then you have state governments who also spend on health, mostly public health, primary health care, all that. Then the largest chunk of it is actually coming from the pocket of Nigerians. That is the inefficiency. Now, that 60-something%, if that something percent is pumped into a pool for insurance purposes, it will buy more healthcare services than what is happening now. And now, the question then is, why is it not being captured into that pool? Okay, a lot of things. First, like I said before, in most cases, for health insurance to work on a national level, it has to be mandatory. And thank God we have finally crossed that bridge. Most states are also made their own mandatory. Yeah. So now there is another challenge. That challenge is the way the people themselves appreciate health insurance. A lot of you from a religious background, you say that what's the word they use? Not my portion.
Oh.
Not my portion. How can I be contributing to? Then you talk of traditional beliefs in one form or the other and all that. So that is another dimension altogether. So there needs to be a reorientation of the people. Apart from making it compulsory, you can make it compulsory as much as you want, but if somebody insists that, look, no, I cannot be contributing to for illness to come upon me and all that, you have a challenge. So in implementing that provision of the law, you need to take into consideration this aspect where there are going to be a reorientation, an education of the people to ensure meet with all both the religious leaders, traditional leaders, also you meet everybody to let them understand why we need to put money together in a pot. And if well managed, all of us would enjoy from it. There's nothing, for God's sake, I'm sure you will love a situation where you walk into a hospital and all you need to do is present a card to confirm that it's you, and you receive care, irrespective of whatever it is. And actually, it has started working. People have realized that a lot of, even with the civil servant, with the federal civil servant scheme that we have been running since, a lot of people actually, in fact, testimonies are there. You will see somebody maybe on what level is below, level 7, below whatever, you are talking of surgeries done at such a gigantic amount of money, and the only contribution they make at that point is just maybe 10% of the drugs that were prescribed, that's all. So it can work, but you must address these two areas that seem divergent, but they need to converge.
All right, let's look at the limitations of the present health insurance scheme in Nigeria. You will observe that even with what we have now, it only covers basic issues or sicknesses or ailments, but not serious ones like cancer. Do you think there's a need for review?
You see what I would say to you. The problem of educating all Nigerians. What you just said now is totally wrong. Totally wrong. Do you know we are HMO? We are covering federal civil. We are covering federal government workers. Part of the coverage is cancer. I think we pay about 80% of whatever, or 60% of whatever, well, at least a significant portion of, if they need radiotherapy, you need chemotherapy and all that stuff. Yes, we do. We do. So to a large extent, if you see the bouquet of services covered under the NHIS, look, it will amaze you. But people don't know. People don't know.
So awareness now is
Awareness is key. Is key. Is key. Is key. Awareness is one of the major problems. Ignorance. Ignorance. I've said it before, and I'll say it in this particular program. If we can market health insurance the way we market Coca-Cola, most of our problems will be solved. Yes, because it is even more important. Coca-Cola, please don't be.
Yeah, because he just did free advert for a brand on the station. We might bill him for that.
Yeah. In fact, it wasn't a positive advertisement anyway. So now, brands spend money to ensure that people get to know them. Now, we seem to be doing the opposite here. We are not marketing what people should know, what they stand to benefit by. And I tell you, this contribution we are talking about is so minute. It's minute, really. In most states, now most states have floated their health insurance schemes. Do you know how much they charge per year? We work in about, I think, 8 states for now, and averagely, it's about 8,500 per year per person. 8,500 naira. And that person that we are talking about, I don't see that person spending less than 8,500 on recharge cards just to say, how are you? Baroni, this, that, this, that. No. So there needs to be a serious reorientation on the part of the people, and then of course government has to get its acts right too, to ensure that if, we buy into it, we don't just come and a lot has been done. The NHIS, prior to even this law, I've been doing quite a lot, talking about getting drugs, branded drugs and things and all that to make it cheaper, especially for the hospitals and things like that. So I just believe that it's a combination of two sides. One is getting the people change of attitude, and like what you are doing, being able to get this information out to people, let them know that health insurance is not something that it's not possible for government to say they are going to offer you free health care. It's not possible.
So you talked about awareness. What can be done to ensure that people that need to have this information, like those in the rural areas, what can be done to ensure that they are aware of things like this, provisions like this? You talked about the not my portion syndrome and all. How should government leverage, liaising with traditional rulers, religious rulers, to get to the grassroots? Lots of people go to churches, lots of people go to mosques, and then you have traditional rulers.
Let me ask you a question. Let me ask you a question. Now, how did people know about Ebola?
$1 million question. You'll be surprised that there are some people who did not know of Ebola.
No, the majority of people knew about Ebola. I don't want to mention the last pandemic, because you will say, okay, maybe from
COVID-19,
external, that's COVID-19.
Yes.
It's still happening, but the point is, practically, I doubt if there is no Nigerian who doesn't know about COVID-19. Yeah. Now, what happened? It is the realization, first and foremost, of how important it is. And if you look at the way the Nigerian system is structured, you have the federal, you have the state, you have the local government, you have the listing. You can start from there. Dissemination of information straight down the line is one of the major public health things that you want to talk about. You keep on hammering about.
You repeat.
You have traditional rulers that you engage. You have religious rulers that you engage. You have politicians and all that and everything. What do you, for God's sake, take the last election. Do you think among the three, or in fact there are so many of them, do you think they didn't reach out to practically almost all Nigerians as much as they could? Mm-hmm. They did. So it is a question of us agreeing that we need to do this and structure it that way with that mentality that we need to reach everybody down the line. And I'm telling you, it won't take you it won't take you such a long time for people to be talking about health insurance as they are the way they are talking about what's the cost of, you know that cost of Gary, if it rises today, almost all Nigerians will know.
All right.
Absolutely.
All right. What a way to wrap up this discussion. I'm even impressed with the fact that you had to enlighten me on the issue of the health insurance, because I had an experience before now where I presented my card and I was told there are limitations, which was what led to that question. But anyway, you are the expert and we've been able to learn from you. Thank you, Dr. Chidi Ukan.
Thank you
for sharing your thoughts on health finance in Nigeria.
Thank you for having me.
Vivian? I think what a way to wrap up for today.
Yeah, it was a good one.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
One more day to go.
Yeah.
Doctor, we had lots of medical practitioners on board today. We had Dr. Oladoyin Odubanjo. We also had Dr. Ben Ifanyi, and right now we have Dr. Chidi Ukandu, and we leveraged on health financing, research, as well as the ups and downs and the way forward. Thank you so much for hanging out with us today. If you did have fun, why don't you join us again, same time, same station. Until then, do have a good day. I am Vivian Uguche.
And don't forget, the conversation continues on our social media platform and our YouTube platform, where you can do the catch-up. I am Femi Ayodele. Have a nice time.